There's a lot of excitement about the prospect of what Darnell Washington is going to bring to the Steelers offense, not just by himself, but what he can do with Pat Freiermuth in the double tight end packages that they can offer. We'll talk about that with a former NFL tight end himself, the man Dorin Dickerson. We're going to bring him on. You can hear him on 93.7 The Fan, but he's going to have a lot of perspective on that, how it's worked in the past, and how it can work in the future for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm your host, Chris Carter, and this is the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. And we have a man returning to the show. It's been a minute, but we're happy to have him back. Dorin Dickerson, a Pitt man himself, and also a former NFL tight end. You can now hear him on the morning show of 93.7 The Fan. Dorin, how you been, man?
Oh, I'm great, Chris. Thanks for bringing me on. And, I have a little inkling that we're going to talk about my favorite position in all of football, and that is the toughest position, the smartest position, the best athletes, and that is the tight end position.
Absolutely. I'm here to talk to you about it. Now, I got to say, when you and we were kind of on the same wavelength on Twitter leading up to the draft, when Mike Tomlin was like, when Omar Khan was going over positions and he was like, corners and edge rushers. And then Mike Tomlin says tight end. And we were both like, right there, Darnell Washington, that's him. And we were just both like wondering, would it be there? And then you and I saw us both tweeting during the draft, like, Darnell Washington's still there. It can happen. And then they land him. Tell everyone, because I'm just Chris Carter, who I played high school football. I got an academic scholarship, but I stayed off the field because I wasn't trying to get my butt kicked at Cheney University. But this is a man here who played at the collegiate level, who played at the NFL level. Why were you so interested in Darnell Washington being a Pittsburgh Steeler?
Well, just seeing his college film and knowing what the offense he came from, and he came from a winning team, two-time national championship team, guys around him getting drafted in the first round. So the competition was elite every single day in practice. And what he brings to the table, he brings size, and he's 6'7", 270 pounds. He was regarded as one of the best blockers in college football, but that's not really what intrigued me the most. The most was the fact that he is extremely athletic. And he can move pretty well. 4.6, 4.40. He had the best short shuttle in the NFL scouting combine. His production was down on paper because on the other side of him, they have the best tight end in the country in Bowers, who is a receiving threat. He's going to be a first-round pick next year.
Yeah.
So his production on the stat line was down this year because of Bowers. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't be a factor in the passing game. I just think that they just didn't need him as much in the passing game. So I think he has a lot more to show athletically in the passing game, just as much as he has to show as a blocking tight end. And if you fuse that together, you're getting the pick of the litter. You're getting a Rob Gronkowski type guy who could do both. He can, be in line and block an extra tackle, but also in the red zone. You have a 6'7" target who can move down the seam, who can move, drag routes, who could do all kinds of different things. That just enhances your offense, exponentially. If you're Kenny Pickett and now you have a big target that you could trust alongside of a guy who's regarded as one of the other best tight ends in the NFL and Pat Freiermuth, all day. Let's go. How could you not be a fan of that pick? Now, I know he's dealing with a little bit of an injury right now, but he'll get through that. He'll work through that, and the NFL trainers will take care of him and make sure he's ready to go when the time is needed. But whenever I saw his name drop, I'm like, all right, the Steelers are going to get a steal here if they do pick him, and they picked him in the third round, and I think that they're going to get a steal with that guy.
I think so too. I put him as my 26th best player overall on my big board. Like I thought that some team would be really smart to get him in the back half of the first round and wait for that. And yeah, sure, he doesn't have all the tools of a receiving tight end. Like he hasn't displayed every catch radius in the world, but the guy has an insane catch radius. We saw it at the combine. We saw it on tape. He can also make people miss with the ball. He can also run people over with the ball in his hands. And and again, we'll get to the Gronk aspect of that because you played with Gronk. You saw what that was like in New England. And I want to get that perspective a bit later in the second segment. But looking at specifically Darnell Washington with Pat Freiermuth, to me, that 12 personnel package idea of, you still got Johnson, you still got Pickens on the outside, Najee in the backfield, Kenny at quarterback, but then having those two guys with the size that they have, with the athleticism they have to be receivers, but also then to turn into blockers with the new kind of beat 'em up style the Steelers are talking about playing, that to me speaks a lot about what the Steelers could do and the question marks it can cause for defenses who try to stop them with the different alignments that these type of formations will force upon them.
Yeah, I mean, like, what are you going to do? Pick your poison. Are you going to, play a nickel defense and try to stop the pass and then they run the ball at you and you have Darnell Washington or Pat Freiermuth blocking the nickel corner? Or are you going to, stack the box and then you're going to put those guys down the seam? So it's kind of you kind of dictate what type of offense you want to run through those guys. If that's going to be your main formation, which I anticipate that'll be one of their top formations, you could just do so much. You could line Pat Freiermuth up in the backfield and motion him around and have Darnell Washington on the line of scrimmage. You could split them out. One guy can even go split outside of George Pickens and be the X in the red zone and be that big threat and throwing fade balls. You can do anything you want out of that two tight end formation, and they call it the 12 formation. They call it 12, and you don't have to necessarily call it 12. I mean, Pat Freiermuth can essentially be a third wide receiver, or even Darnell Washington could be a third wide receiver. It could be that hawk formation, as we call it, with three receivers and one tight end and one back. So you could just do so much, and you could dictate what you want to do on offense. And then this is where somewhat Kenny Pickett comes in the fold. This is where you need to see that jump from year one to year two. Kenny Pickett sees a different, front or a different, blitz package that may be coming at him, and he could check into something or check out of something and not have to worry about falling off, not worrying about the production of the run game falling off, not worrying about the production of the pass game falling off, because you have a, double threat at tight end on both sides in that formation to have those guys on the field. There's just so much you can do. And all in all, it makes that room one of the best in the NFL. With Connor Hayward and the things he's going to be doing this year as an H-back. Then you re-sign Gentry, who could be your third guy. I mean, I'm sure we'll see personnels and formations with all four of those guys on the field at once. And maybe they're all bunched up tight, and then they shift out, and they're all playing every wide receiver spot, and you can pick your poison from there. So I just think that Matt Canada has really, got himself some weapons and some utilage to be able to expand this offense. He and Kenny Pickett have to be ready to expand it themselves mentally, and Kenny has to do it physically and on the move and awareness-wise and knowing what he sees and how to counter that. You can really grasp that through this two tight end look that they potentially might roll out there. Darnell Washington is a really, really good focal point for this offense this coming year. And obviously Pat Freiermuth will do his thing. And you're not really putting as much onus on Pat Freiermuth as they had in the last 3 years of being that blocking tight end. Now Pat Freiermuth can be himself, which is, an extended flex tight end or a move guy. Now you don't have the onus of Pat Freiermuth staying still in line with his hand in the dirt and having to reach block a 9 technique or a big defensive end like Myles Garrett. So, and then, I mean, you could just unravel this whole situation. Now,
listen to the insight, people.
Obviously you drafted his buddy too. So
yeah,
say, who's a young tackle in Broderick Jones. So say Broderick Jones, hopefully not, but say he's going against a Myles Garrett, which he will, and he needs some help. He's going to have his buddy right next to him in certain plays, be like, hey, Darnell, you're staying in this play. Yeah, you tap me on the hip. You're going to stay in with me. And we're going to double team Myles Garrett. I know him like the back of my hand. We're going to be able to lock that side of the line down. Hey, I need to reach Myles Garrett, Darnell or Broderick. If I'm Darnell, I need to reach Myles Garrett. I need your help. So I need you to bump my hip to get me on the move so I can get out there and reach him. So those little things that people don't really think about, those really matter. Having your buddy that you played next to majority of the time in college is going to help both of those guys a lot. So this pick was fantastic, and I think it definitely bolsters this offense.
I want to get back to the Kenny Pickett aspect in the third segment of the show, but I want to also get to your experience seeing what the Patriots did in the early 2010s with their tight end combination, because you were in that tight end room and very few people could offer that kind of perspective. You'll get that perspective right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast in just a minute here. But first, before we do any of that, I want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors, because this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. BetterHelp Therapy is the best place for you to go whenever you're trying to deal with life's twists and turns and find ways to show up for yourself by getting the help that therapy can offer. And this isn't a crisis line. This isn't self-help. This is actual professional therapy done securely online and available to people worldwide at BetterHelp Therapy Online, where they will assess your needs and will match you with your own licensed professional therapist in 48 hours. You can log into it anytime on your account and send a message to your therapist. And with therapy, they recognize, hey, it could take a few tries to find the right fit for you, but BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists whenever you need. And if they have a special offer for our listeners, you get this special offer of 10% off your first month at BetterHelp Therapy Online, BetterHelpOnline.com, BetterHelp.com right now /LockedOn. Go there right now, BetterHelp.com /LockedOn. You put all that in, you'll get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp Therapy Online, where you can start seeing the improvements in your life today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're joined today by Dorin Dickerson, again, former NFL tight end and current analyst / radio host at 93.7 The Fan. You can hear him all the time in the morning show there. Dorin, though, I want to talk to you about another team that had athletic, physical tight ends like this, and two of them with a really good one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play in Tom Brady. And when you're talking about the Patriots of the early 2010s, of course, you're talking about Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. Now, of course, Aaron Hernandez turned out to be who he was. That's a whole other story. But on the football field, the threat that they posed by being on the field at the same time, the flexibility that you were talking about, you were in that room. What kind of things did you remember them talking about? Like, hey, this is what we're going to do week in and week out to cause problems for different defenses, whether it was one style of defense or a completely different one.
Those guys were just so smart, let alone the athletic ability and the size that they both had to play the tight end position. That's one thing. But to be able to run offense at a high level, you have to have high-level thinkers on offense. And, obviously Wes Welker was in the fold and Julian Edelman. I mean, we had Ocho Cinco at the time. You had veteran players at the wide receiver spot, and then you had second-year tight ends in Hernandez and Gronk whenever I was there. But those guys were just, their IQ of football was just through the roof. So you were able to put in different wrinkles whenever everybody's on the same page. One time, Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator at the time. He would have Aaron Hernandez in the backfield. And then, you would think, all right, tight end's in the backfield. He's going to shift back to tight end, or he's going to shift to the slot. No, he's just going to stay there. He's going to run the ball because he's that athletic and he's smart enough to actually read a zone as a running back. Even Gronk, let's split him out all the way to the outside and not let him just run a slant, but let him run a sluggo. Those guys, their football IQ was so great, and they fed off of each other in that aspect. And that's what you kind of can expect, hopefully, from Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. Pat Freiermuth is obviously going to be like, hey, whenever I do this is kind of how it goes down in the league. And in this game, whenever I'm playing against this type of defensive end, this is how I approach it. This type of defense, whenever somebody rolls into the box, this is how I approach that. So you can expect a little bit out of that. It's a little bit different dynamic than Hernandez and Gronk, but I would expect more of the running game being a proponent for those two working together very well. And it's like, hey, pick your poison. Like I said before, you can really keep Darnell Washington in line and then use Pat Freiermuth as a wing and let them work together, or use Pat Freiermuth and have him off the ball and off of Darnell Washington's butt and motion across and then come back and cut across the formation. So there's so many things you could do now that you have two guys that could play at that high level. But the only way to be able to expand your offense as an offensive coordinator and as a quarterback and as an offensive line is to have everybody on the same page. And as long as those guys are on the same page and they're grasping what's actually going on conceptually, then they'll be able to start inching their way out. And then before you know it, you'll have 250 plays in your playbook, and it's like pick your poison against the defense. So you want to hope for the cerebral nature of Darnell Washington to pick up faster, especially in OTAs and in minicamp.
Mm-hmm.
So they're able to do that and hit the ground running when the season comes. But, like I said, you could just do so many things with two athletic guys like you're going to have with the Steelers, and really 3 and 4. You have, like I said, Connor Hayward before and Zach Gentry. So you can do 4 different, use 4 guys. It's a really, really good situation for the Steelers to have this many tight ends and for them to do so many different things.
Right. And that's the thing. Like Connor Hayward's not big like the other guys. Like everyone else is like 6'5", 6'7", 6'8", and he's like 6'1" or something like that. So I really envision him being more of the H-back, taking the Derek Watt role as far as being fullback, play here, play there. But you and I have seen Connor Hayward. Heck, we're both Pitt grads. We saw what he did to Pitt in the Peach Bowl for you. That guy can catch a whole bunch of different passes. He can make plays in different ways. The Steelers saw that last year towards the end of the season when he started to get more snaps. There's definitely excitement and ways to use them. And you're right. We're talking about triple tight end sets here, quadruple tight end sets if they really wanted to get nasty in the red zone. And while keeping bigger guys on the field, you'd also have athletic guys who could go up and get the football or provide challenges in different ways. All those things are very interesting, but it all comes back to something that you said earlier. Matt Canada. Can he bring the creativity that would energize this group, that would get them in the positions to maximize their skills, or even not maximize, just put them in the spots where they're going to be difficult to defend, where it's going to cause really big headaches for defensive coordinators. Like you said, do I go out and nickel with a smaller cornerback? Like imagine the Bengals, they still have Mike Hilton. Imagine Mike Hilton trying to stop Darnell Washington, on a deep ball, like those type of mismatches that you can create. Or if you run the ball and then Darnell Washington's then blocking Mike Hilton, and you're talking about a guy who almost has an entire foot on Mike Hilton size-wise. And that's just one cornerback we're talking about there. But I think that one of the biggest things can Matt Canada finally deliver. And you, again, as a Pitt man, you and I both saw what he did for Pitt many years ago when he had that offense humming and they were able to take down Clemson, and the flexibility that it offered. I don't think that Matt Canada, whereas he hasn't done a great job at all, but I don't think that he's had the tools to kind of recreate something like that without an offensive line. He had an aged quarterback and then a rookie quarterback last year. He didn't have as many weapons as he does now. But this, to me, feels like the year. If you want to see the creativity, if Matt Canada wants to prove that, hey, I'm not just some guy up here being a goofball, I do have great ideas, I feel like this is a prime opportunity to show that, specifically with the tight end group.
Yeah, he has all the tools in the toolbox. You just hope that he doesn't use a hammer to try to hammer a screw into the wall. Like that's kind of what you saw last year. It's like, why aren't you using a Phillips head and you're using a hammer trying to, nail this screw into the wall? Like, what are you doing? Hopefully he makes the right decisions. And I really do think that is going to predicate, and then we touched on it a little bit, on Kenny Pickett's growth. And this offseason being so crucial for Kenny Pickett, finally being under one offense, finally not just getting thrown into the fire, having a full offseason, having a full OTAs, having a full minicamp, having a full training camp of being the guy. I think that will help with Matt Canada and what he's trying to do with the offense. But all in all, he has all the tools in the toolbox. He just has to use them the right way and where they're supposed to be used. It's kind of like laying the red carpet out. It's like, hey, man, just don't mess this up. And sometimes with Matt Canada, he just needs to get out of the dang way.
Mm-hmm.
If he just gets out of the way and has the awareness to get out of the way and let Kenny cook, like we saw a couple times last year.
Cook.
I mean, that's kind of Kenny's game.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure that the rest of the offensive players will fall in line with that. Just let him cook it sometimes. But he has to have the awareness, the in-game awareness, to know when that situation is. It's like, hey, let's pick up some momentum. Let's pick up some steam, some energy. Kenny, you got it this series. You know what? We're going to run 2 minutes, but, it's not 2 minutes. It's the second quarter, and it's the beginning of the second quarter. Hey, NASCAR, we're going to run no huddle. Get up to the line. Let me know what you see whenever you come off this series, and go out there and try to lead the team and try to figure out your ways to navigate throughout the defense and throughout this series. So he has to have that awareness to know whenever Kenny is on or Kenny's about to be on, to give the ball to Kenny and let him cook. Because I think Kenny's going to be at that point in his second year where he's like, hey, you know what? I know what I'm seeing. I know this is a cover 3. I've seen it 1,000 times. I know what the Ravens are going to do. I know what the Bengals are going to do. If they blitz here, I know this guy's dropping on the other side, so that means I'm going to go here and making sure everybody's on the same page and be able to work that way. That's what I think Matt Canada needs to do alongside of using the right tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely. I'm right on the same page with you. A lot of this is on Matt Canada, but you also brought up this is going to be on Kenny too for him to step up. And when you let Kenny cook, he's got to cook. We're going to talk about Kenny Pickett in this third segment here, get your insights on him and what you want to see from him developing as a second-year quarterback in the NFL. We'll get to that in just a second, but first I want to remind you guys of a campaign that I've embarked upon from here to raise funds for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation as we work to find a cure for cystic fibrosis. If you want to donate to the campaign, you can use the QR code that's on your screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. You can also go to the website finest.cff.org/PGH50finest/Carter Critiques. And if you just want to click on that link, look on the description of the audio version of this if you're listening on our podcast, or the description on YouTube, and the link will be there as well. And we've also offered our new promo for this campaign. You don't have to pay anything if you don't want to. If you want, when you call in at 412-223-6644, you call that number to leave your name and where you're from, and we can answer your question on the show as long as your question is less than a minute. But if you wanted to guarantee that your call is heard on the show, because we get tons of calls every day, it's tough to sift through them all. But if you want to guarantee that we will get you on the show, pay $10 towards the campaign. None of this money goes to me. It all goes to the foundation. We're raising money to find a cure for cystic fibrosis. You do those both at the same time. You'll get your question on the show within a week of your donation, guaranteed. We'll be back here with Dorin Dickerson. I'm your host, Chris Carter, on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Dorin Dickerson, former NFL tight end and radio host for 93.7 The Fan. Dorin, let's talk about Kenny a little bit, because you and I were as excited as we were for Darnell Washington as a prospective Steeler, this draft. The idea of Kenny Pickett being a Pittsburgh Steeler as two guys who went to Pitt, that was awesome. But now the honeymoon's over. The first year of, everyone's just excited for Kenny Pickett. Now he's going to have to prove it. But we've seen him put on 5 pounds. We've seen him working in the offseason, calling the offseason workout meetings with the rest of the team, getting the guys together in different parts of the country. What's the biggest thing, if you were to pinpoint maybe 1 or 2 things that you want to see Kenny Pickett take to the next step of his NFL career, in knowing that it's just year 2 and this still isn't going to be who he projects to be be at his full potential?
Decision making. I think that's really what it comes down to, and not having to force things, not having to feel the pressure of making every single play. And Kenny did that last year when that was rookie mistakes, but there was a point in the season where Mitch Trubisky got called back in, and I forget who was it against. I forget who it was against, but he was forcing the ball over the field, threw a bunch of interceptions. That's where the Dolphins, yes. And that's where Kenny Pickett absolutely has to put into the back seat. Like, that should never happen again. Those decisions that he made last year at times, those were rookie decisions. And the decisions he has to make this year, they have to be efficient decisions, and making sure that, if it's third down, and, don't try to force the ball and just throw it away. Things of that nature. And I think Kenny will be fine. Now, cerebrally, Kenny is very smart. He can embrace a lot of the offense and embrace a lot of what's going on at the quarterback position. He's athletic. He's big. He can, you obviously do worry about the concussions a little bit, but hopefully he's gotten past that. But just really embrace the offense and embrace who he is. He knows he's a very confident kid, and he knows what he is capable of, and he knows what he can go out there and do. But decision-making is huge. Decision-making, whenever the ball is in his hands, he has to be efficient with the football and not make the bad mistakes. If he does eliminate that, which we saw towards the end of the year, he did eliminate that, coming from, throwing 8 interceptions. So he did get better as the year went on last year. He honestly has to take that from last year into this year and make sure that never happens again. So number 1 for me would be decision-making all day for Kenny Pickett. And he's going to have the tools. Like I said, Matt Canada's going to have the tools. He'll have the tools in the toolbox and make sure that he eliminates those negative issues.
I'm right with you on that, because to me, the best part of Kenny Pickett at Pitt was his decision-making, especially in that last year in 2021. It looked like every team that threw a defense out there, even some of the games they lost, like Miami and in Western Michigan that year, it wasn't because Kenny Pickett didn't see the field. He was seeing the field all over the place. There was maybe one or two plays where he would like just maybe miss with the trajectory on a ball, but it wasn't because he didn't understand the defenses he was going. The guy is extra prepared. To me, that's always been Kenny Pickett's best asset, is that he comes prepared, he's ready, he thinks on his feet, but he also studies a ton. We've heard a lot about the nook that he would keep in his locker, where he would just kind of dip away after practice and just study film because he didn't want to make the same mistake twice. And we saw him shape up. The interceptions that he threw in the first half of the season disappeared in the second half of the season. If he's able to do that at the next step, now not just limiting mistakes, but increasing the opportunities and the big chance plays, finding the open man, because as much as Matt Canada does have to step up as well, there were plenty of plays where there were open guys and Kenny just didn't see him in time. But part of it also, the Steelers were probably playing protect ball. They were saying, hey, don't take the big chance. Get the ball out quick. Let's let the defense win these games. I think this year, especially with the investments they've made on the offensive line, not just Broderick Jones, but also Isaac Suamalo, and then also Darnell Washington, the growth of Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, George Pickens, and Deontay Johnson with Kenny Pickett, there's a real chance for them to kind of open things up for Kenny Pickett. And let's see what he's like when the Steelers aren't playing, hey, just protect the ball and let the defense win the game. And let's see what Kenny Pickett does with this year. And I do think, like you said, the decision-making part of that is the most exciting part of it. And if we look at the 12 personnel package again, talking about the tight ends and what they can do, Kenny Pickett, I think, did the best when he would find the solo matchups that he really liked across the field. He would study opponents, figure out which players on his team, like even Tayseer Mack, a guy who went undrafted out of Pitt. He would find ways to match him up with the right guys, and then he would pick defenses apart with him. I think Kenny Pickett's the guy who won't focus in on just one player if they're having a great day. Like if George Pickens is going off, he won't just lock into him even if he's double covered. He'll keep surveying the field, and if Pat Freiermuth's the guy one day, he'll go to him. If it's Darnell Washington another play, he'll go to him. I think that could be the real key to unlocking the potential of not just him, but the entire Steelers offense.
Kenny's going to be the third option of this football team, which I think is perfect. The way that they're structuring this, it's going to be, hey, we're going to be a run-first team as we just drafted Broderick Jones. We, Siamalu, we signed in the offseason. We beefed up our offensive line. We got Darnell Washington, who's the best blocking tight end. We want to be a run-first team. We got Najee Harris and Jalen Warner in the backfield. We want to start and filter our football game on offense with our running game. Then the second option is we're going to play defense. Well, you could actually go vice versa. You could say defense, then offense, and running the ball, or running the ball and then playing defense. Second option, let's go right now. They're going to be like, hey, we're a defensive team, and this is how we're going to beat teams. This is how we're going to slow down Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati Bengals. This is how we're going to slow down Lamar Jackson. This is how we're going to slow down Deshaun Watson, and we're going to rely on our running game. Third option is, Kenny, we need you to come through. And I think that is probably the best outlook. And this is obviously all hindsight for me. I mean, I'm just anticipating this happening. And this is probably the best situation for a young quarterback going into his second year to not be like, hey, you have to be the man and throw the ball 50 times a game for us to win. No, you are the third option. We want you to manage the game a little bit. We're going to be a run-first team, and then we're going to set you up. We're going to play great defense, and then we're going to set you up to go out there and finish the game, kind of like an alley-oop. You're going to dribble down the court, and you're going to throw it up, and then you're just going to dunk it down. That's what we're going to look at you to do, Kenny. You do not have to be the man, score 50 points a game like you're LeBron James or something. No, you're going to go out there, and you're going to be the quarterback, and then whenever it's time for you to cook and go in there, you're going to be able to do that. But don't feel the pressure of having to do that every single play, because we got you on the other things. We got you. You're going to be our third option this year, and I think that's the perfect outlook and perfect structure the Steelers need to take this year.
I agree entirely. We look at the Steelers as they're constructed. It'd be great if Kenny Pickett was just lighting people up this year, but you don't need him to. And I think that's the whole point of building the way they have. The stronger offensive line. This is, to me, and I compared this again yesterday, this is, to me, what young Ben Roethlisberger got when he first came to the Steelers. Now, granted, he won the second Super Bowl with not a great offensive line, but that first offensive line he got, Jeff Hardings, Marvell Smith, Alan Faneca, those guys, they could bully you at all times. They had one of the best rushing offenses in the league when you look back at that 2004 and 2005 teams and how that they dominated opponents at the line of scrimmage. It made it so Ben Roethlisberger, when it was time to step up and make the big play, defenses weren't just staring at him and saying, you're the guy I have to worry about. Whereas like when Patrick Mahomes takes the field, everyone's worried about him. And, and that's a challenge that he takes on very well. But for Kenny Pickett, maybe someday he'll be ready for that. But right now, why bet on him having to be ready for that? Why not use, hey, we've invested in all these other pieces. This is the future of what you see, at least right now, while he continues to grow as a veteran in the NFL. And we've seen other teams play like this. The Eagles, for as good as Jalen Hurts is, they were a team that could dominate you on the ground and play great defense, and then Jalen Hurts would come in. The 49ers, that's why Brock Purdy was so successful. They didn't ask too much of him, and when it was time for him to step up, all he had to do was certain things, and the other defenses were too worried about Christian McCaffrey and the offensive line and worrying about the defense that if they mess up, that defense is going to be back on the field and they're going to be fresh. That is the target for what I think the Steelers are headed towards, and I think it's a very good idea that Andy Weidl, Omar Khan, and Mike Tomlin have been building up towards.
No doubt. And you talked about the Eagles, and look who came from the Eagles. Look who constructed that roster, Andy Weidl. And I know he's not a coach, but philosophy-wise and roster building-wise, you can kind of see the proof is in the pudding of how he's constructing. He's like, hey, I want that guy. I need that guy. Omar, I need you to make some moves to get this guy. Can we make a move? Yeah, you know what? We can give him a 4th-round pick, and we could trade up in the draft and get our guy and get your guy. Yep, that's the guy we need in order to make a Super Bowl-ish roster. I'm not saying they're going to make the Super Bowl next year. I'm not saying that they're even going to make the playoffs. But they are trending in that direction of what the Philadelphia Eagles did the past couple of years to get to where they were last year. And Andy Weidl is the guy that really serviced them to do that. He's a piece of the puzzle in Philly, and now he's here, and you can see his handprints on a lot of the decisions being made in this offseason and especially in this draft. And hopefully it pans out for them. Hopefully they take that approach and they run with it.
We'll certainly see if they do. We'll keep you updated with things. Rookie camp starts later this week here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll get our first looks at Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington at the Steelers facility, as well as the other guys like Keanu Benton, Joey Porter Jr., and everyone else on the roster. Dorin, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
I appreciate it, Chris. At Scoring Dorin on Twitter, Instagram, and 93.7 The Fan Twitter account as well. And then at The Fan Morning Show, you can find me there 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 5:40 a.m. to 10 a.m. You'll hear me every single morning. But appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dorin. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thanks to everyone for listening to us today and checking us out. Remember, go on Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a shout out at the end of the show. And don't forget to call in to the show, 412-223-6644. If you call in and give us a $10 donation on the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation campaign that we have, where you have a QR code here to get to the donation page, do both, and you guarantee to get your show answered within a week of your donation right here on the air by me on Locked On Steelers. Again, thanks to Dorin. Thanks to everyone for checking us out. We're back tomorrow. Wes Euler joins the show. We're still talking your Pittsburgh Steelers right here before rookie camp opens up.